Why are people like this? Why do we keep letting certain people get famous? It's us. We're the problem. No, wait, it's you. Whoever let this woman get that far at competition. Now look. Okay, let me just calm down. Let me calm down before I start this video. Hey everyone, I'm Serena the journalist. Welcome back if you've been here before. And if you haven't been here before, hello and welcome. Today we're diving into a topic that honestly drives me insane. The annoying, frustrating, disappointing mess that happened between Huda Mustafa, Lewis Russell and Olandria Carthen. So if you missed it, and I don't know how you missed it, but if you missed it, a few weeks ago, Huda Mustafa and her boyfriend Louis Russell were on Instagram Live and someone called in and dropped a racial slur aimed at Huda's co-star Olandria Carthen. Just take a look.
Whoa, hey.
Yo, I turned that shit off.
Hey.
Not cool. So in this video, we'll be unpacking how situations like this even come about, which is through racial fetishization. And we'll look at how it shows up for Black women and for Black men and how enablers keep this cycle going. Because honestly, if we understand where it comes from, we can try because I don't know how many views the video will get, but we can try to start changing it. And before we get in, please do like this video, comment and subscribe. I'm on the way to 200 subscribers, so literally every little helps. Tesco did not lie, every little helps. So let's talk about it. What is fetishization? Fetishization is the act or the thought of making someone an object or desire based on some aspect of their identity. And so racial fetishization is thus the act or thought of making a certain race or ethnicity the object of desire. Okay? And yes, it is easy to think
desire is just desire, and who I like is who I like, and la 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 la.
But it is deeper than that. It's deeper than just desiring someone. It's when you desire to do something or act in a certain way because of that certain body feature or race, for instance. It's important that we grasp how certain desires can contribute to biases, as well as how they're combined with the objectifying of humans involved in fetishization, which often leads to race and gender-based issues. And what do you think this is due to? You have a guess. What do you think this is due to? Racism, misogyny, and colonialism. The big three in this video. Fetishization serves to continue problematic notions about different groups of people and makes it easier to treat individuals in a way that aligns with our specific biases. And so when we think about fetishization, its roots stem back to colonization, treating everyone that wasn't white as people who are less than. For instance, I'm sure we all know when Black bodies were captured by European and Americans by invading African countries, the fetishization of African women and men was established. In our article of Roots of Racial Fetishization, Colonialism, Imperialism and Racism says, as Africans were put on display to attract tourists in Europe, this dehumanization was conductive in justifying the enslavement and abuse of Black people at the time. And so we can see this when we look at Sara Bartmana, for instance. And now for those who don't know this, it's a really unfortunate, crazy, disgusting piece of history, and the remake of how colonialism is basically... So Sara was one of the first Black women in history known to be subjected to human sexual abuse and trafficking. She was publicly examined and inhumanely exposed throughout her young and quick life. Her display on show was due to negative sexual fascination with African women's bodies by Europeans. She was born in 1789 at the Gamtos River, now known as the Eastern Cape in South Africa, and when she was 21, despite not being able to read, signed a contract with a physician called William Dunlop. William was fascinated by her large backside and genitalia, which was common to the Caucasian people at the time. In the contract, it said that she had to travel with Dunlop and work as a domestic servant. Please guys, let's bear in mind that this was basically a glorified slave, because technically slavery was abolished at the time in Great Britain. But you know, some of these people, they will definitely try and work their way around it. So if you weren't a slave, you were assigned to just work for them, and you'd be like a maid, but doing slave work. She would also have to be exhibited for certain entertainment purposes. And so this was basically the start of the end for her. She was first exhibited in London in the Egyptian Hall at Piccadilly Circus on November the 24th, 1810, and it drew attention of British abolitionists who charged Dunlop and those withholding her against her will. But when it went to court, she testified that she was not being mistreated. And then for her time, she was taken on tours throughout England, and by 1812, she was traveling to Ireland for her job. She wasn't getting paid, so she was traveling to do this exhibition. In September of 1814, after staying just 4 years in Great Britain, she was taken to France and sold to Sir Roux, an exhibitor who showcased animals. And can we just note that there has been such a long issue in society where black women are not seen as women, but like
Animals, and oh yeah, like let's stroke them, let's pet them, let's touch their hair. Wow, look at their body, they're so different.
girl. Ugh. She was put on a public display in and around Paris, often at the Palais Royal, and the exhibitor also allowed her to be sexually abused by patrons willing to pay for her defilement. Roux garnered considerable profit due to the public's fascination with her body, and if that is not crazy, when she was being paraded by mobs, she was displayed at society functions, and it was a ball for France's new establishments, and when she arrived, she dressed in barely anything but a few feathers. So you see where we're going with this. You just have a lot of different men, physicists, exhibitors, scientists, basically looking at this woman and saying, oh my gosh,
I'm so fascinated, I haven't seen anything like this.
and just fetishizing her for the sake of her body. We've come far, but we ain't come that far. We've come far, but we have not come that far. And it was in France that she was examined by scientists and unfortunately later died in Paris at the age of 26 in 1815. But even after her death, scientists preserved parts of her body. For many years, her remains were displayed in a museum in Paris to support racist theories surrounding those of African ancestry. She was carved up by a Napoleon surgeon who made a cast of her body, pickled her genitals and brain, and put her skeleton on display in a museum. And so she wasn't even allowed to rest after she had passed away. And it was only in 2002 that her remains were finally buried near her birthplace in Eastern Cape, Providence. Cecile Lefleur, who was the chairman of National Cousin Consultative Conference Council, said, Sara Bartmana became a symbol of our suffering, and all the misery she went through was a manifestation of how the Cousin people were treated during that period and beyond. And so this was a representation of how Europeans in the West for centuries, not decades, but centuries, thought of black women and this sexualized fetishization. Racial fetishization perpetrates stereotypes. Walter Charles Marvix writes, the dehumanization of black people made it easier to justify the enslavement and abuse to which they were subjected, much as it allows for the disrespect, disregard, and maltreatment of black women today. And with black women, you fall into the realms of sex symbol or masculine, and sometimes there's not really much room for femininity that white women, for instance, were allowed to have and still are allowed to have. And we even see this with black women and sport. Journalist Tamika Wilson interviewed black female athletes about how sports weaponize racist beauty standards against them, and tennis player Sasha Exeter recalled, I was told I looked manly or overdeveloped and overmuscular and didn't feel feminine. She was asked by coaches, can you do something with your hair post-match before the interview? Because it looks kind of crazy right now. Two-time Olympian Crystal Emmanuel found that she was not getting the attention of sponsors, and her coach's answer was her hair. In Emmanuel's experience, she said, it's like if you're not wearing weave or if your hair is not straight, then there's something wrong. But that shouldn't be something I need to change in myself in order for someone to look at me or think I'm worthy of wearing their brand. And this actually reminds me of the documentary on Netflix about Simone Biles, where a lot of gymnasts speak about the racism in the sporting industry, and there was a big segment on hair and how hair was such a big thing, and that it was normal for your hair to be like straight and blonde when you were competing, and for people like Gabby Douglas or people like Simone Biles, they were hated on because their hair was not that texture and wasn't even that color. Looking at Serena Williams, the GOAT, one of the greatest of all time, and she's been constantly attacked in the media, removing her of her tennis qualities. And half the world love her because of her physique, which is leading off this sexualization, and the other half saw her as this masculine woman. Like, do you remember that 2018 awful sketch depiction of her and Naomi Osaka at the US Open? Williams was actually drawn in this exaggerated, muscularized features, much larger in scale, stomping on a racket in apparently a tantrum with a baby's pacifier at her feet. And then you have Osaka, who was drawn delicately. Her skin tone faded beyond recognition, and she had straight blonde hair, erasing all signs of her actual features, not to mention her Haitian and Japanese heritage, as if to make her appear a more sympathetic victim in this dramatization of events. Now to me, and I really hope to most of us that looked wrong, but to many, this is how they saw Serena, which is crazy. And so for black women, racial fetishization doesn't lead to respect, but disregard, disrespect, and feeling insulted. And so now we move on to black men and fetishization. For black men, this is different. Black men and fetishization don't work in the same way for black women and fetishization. A difference is that in some weird way, which I don't agree with, disclaimer, I do not agree with, it's important to note that even within an ethnic group or race, fetishization can still take place. Within communities of colour, fetishization can look like the glorification of lighter skin, colorism, and more Eurocentric features, which is featureism, as well as hair discrimination, tetrism. We got all the isms. We got all the isms here, literally. And anyone who's listened to rap music to any extent will likely hear that fetishization of lighter skin and non-black women in popular lyrics. Gwen Sharp wrote, in both cases, black men's sexuality is fetishized for white audiences. They represent a fantasy of exotic, hypersexual, and sexually gifted black men. While the stereotype could appear positive, after all, they're presented as desirable sexual partners. The flip side is that black men are thus also often presented as more animalistic and sexually aggressive than white men. A stereotype that has been used against them time and time again. And so we see how black men in two different ways are racialized, and this almost indulges people to want to try black men, get a taste and see what it is all about, which we have seen in many, many, many instances. A trend of people trying out black men, dipping their toe in and getting what they can out of it. I've got a few people in mind for that. I don't know who you got in mind for that, but I'm sure we have the same people in mind. In a chapter called You Lord Are So Hot, Race, Black Men and Commodity Fantasies, is written, the emergence of bodies and sexual experiences as objects to be consumed is driven by capitalism that colonizes experiences and transforms them into commodities. And so it does seem like these men are product, and if you like, you can buy and continue, and if you don't like, you can throw away and get a refund. This person, yeah, they had the right idea.
I think likes me for who I am, but once she gets to know me, she's suddenly like, oh, why aren't you like other black people? Why aren't you like this? Why don't you do this? And suddenly the wheels start turning. You're like, oh, she doesn't like me. She likes who she thinks I am. And for us black guys, it's easy to try and, ignore this.
This is especially related to the black body and the idea of the sexual otherness. It is thought that sexual otherness, where the body becomes commodified and how racialized evenings become the place for fetishization of black body. It is argued that given the centrality of sexual performance and competitive in the sex club, black men's ascribed sexuality carries more erotic capital than white men's. Whilst older racial tropes draw upon a primitive and uncivilized nature, representation of black men in the media draws upon the centrality of the body that at one moment reinforces the animality of the man that is often linked with criminality, racializing its distinctiveness from the disciplined and controlled white masculinity. And simultaneously, in the media and wherever you go, the black body is loaded into the desire of white women, where their satisfaction is projected onto the body itself. It is a racial fetishization of black masculinity and that embodiment of such a masculinity that becomes desirable. Representations of black men can sometimes operate through a celebritized desirability. The black hip-hop rapper, the successful athlete, the film star. And in the context of sex club, a similar form of celebration takes place where the black male body is often celebrated, desired, sought after and promoted. And so the article goes on to say that as such, the fetish of the black body is simultaneously a reconstruction of a gender politics that requires women's sexuality to be subject to black men's desire. And we see this in our culture, we see it in our media, like Love Island and dating shows are exact representations of this yearning for the black male body, compared to how black women and their bodies are treated. Black men in these shows can be treated like some royalty and have their choice, whilst their women counterparts are more times than not picked last. I have literally done a whole video on black women in reality dating shows, so do look at that because that explains more about why black men are put on a pedestal in dating shows while black women are not. And that is why it works differently. Many times black women are seen as a fun time and you can be them for a certain time compared to black men who are seen as the prize. Knowing how the black men can be glorified for their blackness when it comes to sex, there are also added things to this, such as height, complexion, and how much of a closer proximity they are to whiteness. And when you are in relationships with people who desire you for this fetish, it is glorified and out of internalizing racism. And just because you're a partner, I just want to say this. who needs to hear this? Someone needs to hear this. Just because your partner may treat you well out of the desire of stereotyping does not mean, okay, does not mean that they will treat your other counterparts well. Okay, because it's given,
oh, I can't be racist because my partner is black. It's given, oh, I can't be racist because, like, my great-grandma was black.
No. And so this goes on to my next and final segment. The problem with fetishization and enablers. So the whole reason for this video, as I said at the start, was stemmed from the Instagram live that concerned Huda Mustafa from Love Island and Lewis Russell from Love is Blind. And in the video, they're seen laughing when someone prank calls them, calling Huda's fellow Love Islander castmate Olandria the N-word. And then the pair quickly posted their own pointless, stupid statements that I will post here, and I don't really have time to read it out because it was literally like they were saying words, but nothing was being said. And they're basically saying that they didn't know what happened and they're not racist because XYZ. Especially Lewis, who was basically backing Huda by saying because he's black, she can't be racist. And he also can't be racist because he knows what racism feels like as a black man. Yeah, I don't think that's how it works.
And he goes on to say in his statement that he has faced a lot of racism. My guy, if that is true, the first thing you would have done when you heard that slur is to be disgusted and appalled. Why were you laughing? If you have faced so much racism in this country and it's been so terrible for your psyche, why was that not activated when you heard that racial slur?
And so let me explain just a bit. Lewis is mixed race but racialized as black. He is from Manchester, England, who I do believe could have experienced racism, but not to the same extent as Olandria, dark woman from the US. First of all, Lewis is a man who the context in which they could experience racism is different, and he's a close proximity to whiteness. And so for many people, it's the idea of black man because you have a bit of both and not too much of one thing, if you know what I mean. But I also think this is wrong for anyone to assume that just because that your partner can't be racist or even engage with racisms and racist things because they're dating someone who isn't white. I think that's dangerous, and this video explains it.
When Louis said yesterday that he faces racism, of course he's not that black, but he still faces racism. I already felt like there was some underlying hatred for dark-skinned women there. See the way Huda was speaking to Jeremiah? Oh, I get it. Speaking like that to someone is only okay when it comes from a lighter toned woman, right? When it comes from a black woman, oh, I would have slapped her. But when it's his preference, perhaps the exotic woman, it's okay.
I think it's been dangerous to think that because you will have enablers like Lewis who sort of condone it and won't hold the person accountable. Literally, Tamira Mari Housley went through the exact same thing when she looked the camera in the eye and was like, my husband is not a racist.
I'm gonna look in that camera right there and let everybody know my husband is not a racist. Boom, and you and that is.
But he was saying some really weird things, Tamira, so can you account for that? There are a lot of assumptions that people who are in interracial relationships don't hold stereotypes that would prevent them from dating or marrying someone of a different race. But research literally shows that that isn't always the case. For example, the researchers note that one study finds that white people with black friends who are black still express anti-racism, sometimes describing their friend as an exception to their beliefs about the larger group. And some of these closed interracial relationships are sustained by avoiding any discussion of race or racial inequality. For people who are open to interracial dating, research shows that they may still express preferences that align with existing racial stereotypes. Researchers Jennifer Bratter, a professor of sociology at Rice, and Mary Campbell wrote that some presume their presence will normalize interracial contact, undermine the racism of the extended family members who encounter the couples, and increase positive social contact between the different racial groups. Unfortunately, evidence from the experiences of interracial couples suggests that this is not always the case. And so they believe that from the research reviewed in their study, it does not support the assumption that interracial relationships reduce racism. And this is really important. Please hear this. Please hear this. As interracial relationships are growing. The Guardian reported that in 2008, 22% of black male newlyweds chose partners of another race, compared to 9% of black female newlyweds. And according to analysis of the US Census data in 1967, about 3% of newlyweds had a spouse of a different racial or ethnic gender. But in 2019, that number had grown to 19% of all newlyweds.
I don't want anyone to watch this video and be like, oh my gosh, you hate interracial relationships. Oh my gosh, like, you're so racist. Like, you don't like black and white people together. Like, no, like, we're in the 21st century, get over it.
That is not my point. I don't care who you love. Love whoever, but just understand that some people still hold negative stereotypes towards people despite them dating someone who's part of that group. Okay? That's just my point. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And like, if you're friends with people, you need to hold them accountable. Even if they're your partner, your best friend, your mom, your dad, your grandma, whatever, hold them accountable. As of the 2020s, around 20% of marriages in the US involve people of different races or ethnicities compared to 11% in 2000. And in the UK, we find that 5.7% of households, which is around 1.4 million people, had partners from different ethnic groups. But over a third, 37% of UK adults have experienced racial microaggressions or discrimination due to being part of an interracial couple. You see what I'm talking about holding people accountable? You see what I'm talking about holding people accountable? Because of this statistic. Respondents must commonly cite fearing a backlash or critical responses from their closest to them, their friends and family, as well as negative reactions and behaviours from colleagues while interracially dating. And so with this increase, it's important, as I said, that we don't let racial stereotypes creep its way into relationships where it isolates other people. Which is why I go back to the fact that interracial relationships do not merit expulsion from interacting in racial stuff. Okay. And so because of what happened with Huda, she was pulled from collaborations such as Huda Beauty, Gymshark, and companies were saying they didn't want to support what was happening. And many people didn't think it was a big deal. And other people like myself was thinking, yeah, like it is a big deal.
As for little old me, for people saying Huda didn't do anything, she didn't have to. Is it fair? She signed the contract. When you're in like public facing fields, it's part of the job. You literally have to keep your hands clean or try your best to. When brands are paying you hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to be the face of their product, it comes with a big responsibility. You still have to be a professional. This is a job. Part of being a professional is knowing what things are bad for business. Why are you on live with this geezer anyway?
And they're right. Point blank, period. And we saw this as a recurring thing. I think we all remember at the reunion when Olandria said Huda didn't stick up for her when she was being racially abused by her fans, which can just show how easy it is for people to avoid taking accountability. And just because the black men didn't receive this sort of hate, like Ace didn't receive this hate, Taylor didn't receive this hate, it doesn't expel black women for receiving this hate. It works out differently. Fetishisation works out differently for black women and black men. And I think that says a lot about our society and the different hierarchies we place men and women in. And at a further extent, the different hierarchies we place black men and black women in. The disrespect that black women face sometimes would never be seen or thought about when it comes to black men, let alone laughable. And so what are your thoughts on the issue? And what do you think this says about our society? If you've made it this far to the video, or to the end of the video, thank you for watching. As I said earlier, my name is Serene the Journalist. I do video essays on culture, politics, news, all of the above. I am a journalist, hence the name. And so I do write articles on my Substack, which will be linked below for you to read and just get more of a feel about what I am about. Please do, you might as well, you're literally here, you might as well, please do like, comment and subscribe, and I'll be back very soon for another video.